Everyone knows the sights of San Francisco, from its famous Golden Gate to its jam-packed Fisherman's Wharf. But there are some tourist spots the city keeps under wraps. Alcatraz Island. Enter a haunted tunnel that's never been filmed before. The USS Hornet. Climb aboard a floating museum that's full of ghostly sailors. Winchester Mystery House. Tour a 160-room mansion designed by ghosts. These reported hauntings and more on America's Most Haunted Places. San Francisco. Crazy streets, spectacular views, cable cars, strip clubs. It's the city to visit if you're searching for the ultimate touring experience. What most visitors don't know about this town is the claim that it's haunted by all kinds of ghosts. Some believe the city's most popular tourist destination, Alcatraz Island, is the eternal resting place of some of the scariest spirits around. Convicts called it Hellcatraz. Hollywood called it The Rock. And that's exactly what it is, a rocky island in the middle of the San Francisco Bay with $1 million view of the city. Alcatraz Penitentiary opened with 336 cells and 32 convicts. 30 years later, the government shut it down. At $13 a day per prisoner, the price was just too steep. Then, in 1973, the National Park Service reopened the island as a tourist attraction. Today, more than 1 million people visit Alcatraz every year. They come for the boat ride, the views, the history, the spine-tingling thrill of being locked up behind bars, and, of course, the ghosts.
The feeling is just awful.
It's giving me the chills right now, man. I got goosebumps.
It's creepy.
It's said that Alcatraz is haunted everywhere. The basement cells of Solitary, the ruins of the warden's house. Could spirits from the island's past still be here? It all started in 1859 when the Union Army built a military base on the island. Soldiers assigned to Alcatraz had great views, but saw little action. In 1934, the island took on a darker purpose. It became a federal prison for some of the most notorious criminals in America.
The worst of the worst were sent to Alcatraz. One of the most famous inmates to arrive on Alcatraz was probably Al Capone in 1934. They wanted to teach old Al a lesson on Alcatraz. He spent 5 years here.
One of the most frightening ghost stories on the Rock is about a convict murdered in solitary confinement in 1939. Michael Corey is a paranormal investigator. He swears he saw a ghost in cell 14D when he was 16 years old.
I saw what appeared to be a young man in his late 20s, early 30s, shirtless, couldn't see him from the waist down, but I knew that he was very, very cold. I could see the goosebumps standing up on his body. This was not a human being that I was witnessing. It was indeed a spirit.
According to Michael, the ghost said he had been a prisoner on Alcatraz. He was sent to solitary confinement. One night, after being dragged into the hole, he screamed to the guards that someone or something was in the cell with him. The guards ignored him, convinced he was trying to get out of doing the time. The next morning, the guards found the dead convict's body.
And the autopsy report showed that there was no possible way that he could have died of suffocation by his own infliction. The handprints that were on his throat would have been from someone else.
Ranger John Cantwell escorted another psychic, Stosh Murray, to solitary confinement. She told us weird things started happening the minute she entered the cell block.
The first thing that happens to me immediately is I want to start veering and moving in this direction away from that part of the cells. I feel as if someone's strangling me. My neck's getting very tight.
Once inside the cell, Stosh sensed one crazy ghost.
So as I go in there, and my hands feel the energy pushing back, pushing back. Something wants to get out. There's something dark inside. What I'm feeling here is that this is an entity that's really going mad. He's losing his sanity, and that entity screams, howls, cries, and he just shrivels and shrinks.
Do ghosts really haunt the cells on D Block? No one knows for sure, but today, when tourists enter a cell for a thrill ride to the past, they may want to have an escape plan prepared in advance. Another site that tourists love to visit on the island is the warden's house. It's in ruins now, but 38 years ago, the last warden to serve on Alcatraz lived here.
Aside from the prison, it probably is one of the most, if not the most, haunted dwelling here on the Rock.
It's been said that a couple of guards saw a ghost while playing cards at the warden's house.
One particular Friday evening, they were downstairs, sitting down to play cards, and this man appeared out of nowhere. He had an old-fashioned hat on his head, the type of hat that a dealer would wear at a poker game. And he was sitting there with a deck of cards, and he flipped the cards like he was a pro.
Flipping cards like a Vegas dealer is not so unusual, but flipping cards and being transparent at the same time, that's a feat these two guards weren't ready for.
They jumped from the table and ran out of the room.
This isn't the only ghost on Alcatraz that has sent people running. It's been said there was a mass ghost sighting just outside the prison's administrative offices in the 1950s. An office worker was typing when she heard several loud blasts. She ran to the window and looked out. 50 or 60 Civil War soldiers were gathered around a gallows.
3 men were standing on gallows planks, and there was a mass of uniformed men around her. She heard a blast of a cannon again and again.
At that moment, the warden's wife was hanging laundry. She heard what she thought were sonic booms. When the office worker found her, they raced back to the scene of the sighting. The soldiers had vanished into thin air. 60 ghosts in one sighting, maybe one for the record books. On the north side of the island, there's another part of Alcatraz that tourists never see. The National Park Service just opened a 300-foot-long underground tunnel. This is the first time the tunnel has ever been filmed. Michael and Stosh revealed their psychic impressions of the area.
I'm picking up lots and lots of travel, lots of people, men especially, going through with big carts filled with something heavy. I don't know exactly what that is, but I'm getting that very strong.
It's a protective hideaway to go from one place to another. It's a hidden sort of communication line or gateway or walkway.
Ranger John Cantwell told us about the tunnel's history.
In the 1870s, the United States Army chiseled through the rock, and they created a communications tunnel so that they could run from one side of the rock to the other and alert the troops that there were ships coming through the Golden Gate.
Back above ground, in the prison's main building, former inmate Whitey Thompson told us one of his ghost stories. Starting in 1958, Whitey served 4 years on the Rock. Today, he sells his life story to tourists. He swears he saw a ghost on the Michigan Avenue cell block.
I happened to look down there, and I seen like a silhouette of a guy standing there. He stared at me for maybe 2 or 3 minutes, and then all of a sudden, he went off this way, and I took off running, and I went through the cutoff and come down here to intercept him, but he disappeared behind here, and I never seen him again.
Up in the hospital, Stosh Murray didn't see any ghosts, but right outside the prison's operating room, she came down with a mind-wrenching headache that was not of this world.
I have a very severe headache in here. I'm off balance. I start to get dizzy. I'm lightheaded. I just felt like somebody just whirled me around.
Was it a ghost? And if so, what was this ghost up to?
What I felt like is if somebody had just drugged me. I felt like I was just given some sedation or something, and I just felt like I was going to go out. That's amazing. That's an incredible room right there.
Government officials aren't usually the types to believe in ghosts, but Ranger John Cantwell admitted that he sensed something weird on the island.
I'll go on record and say that at night, you know, when I'm walking down Broadway and it's dark and there's no one around, it does have an interesting vibe to it. It can be kind of spooky walking down Broadway at night, but I've never seen any ghosts.
Are there really ghosts on Alcatraz Island? No one knows for sure. But one thing is certain. These ghost stories haven't stopped the million-plus tourists from visiting this island each year. Coming up, people say there's a ghostly crew working 24/7 on a haunted ship in the San Francisco Bay. San Francisco is known for its bay, its boats, and its bridges. Across one of these spans, you'll find a one-of-a-kind floating museum, a retired aircraft carrier with a gift shop, guided tours, and a wild ride in a high-tech flight simulator. It's called the USS Hornet, and it was first commissioned in 1943. During World War II, this aircraft carrier saw a lot of action in the Pacific, shooting down more enemy aircraft than any other ship. In 1969, the Hornet retrieved the Apollo 11 space capsule from the first man-on-the-moon mission. Today, it's a National Historic Landmark, major tourist attraction, and home to what's believed to be a skeleton crew of ghosts. Ironically, when it was in active service, the Hornet was nicknamed the Gray Ghost. Alan McKean is director of museum exhibits on the Hornet.
Considering some of the sightings and some of the apparitions that allegedly have occurred on the Hornet, maybe that's very appropriate.
Today, when visitors step aboard this 20-story, 40,000-ton floating airstrip, they may see a lot more than just gray steel, refurbished jets, and a high-speed aircraft elevator.
There was one family that came down to the admissions who had been in the area we're in now, which is the forecastle, and they had heard voices, and all four of them had said they had heard the same thing, and I believed them.
Hearing disembodied voices can be frightening, but some have reported seeing ghosts in full uniform. Parapsychologist Lloyd Auerbach has been investigating the ghostly sailors of the USS Hornet for years.
Most people are actually seeing full-bodied apparitions. They're seeing full-figured, three-dimensional people, sailors, officers from the World War II era.
Alan McKean is on the fence when it comes to believing in ghosts, even though he had an encounter he can't explain away. According to Alan, it happened on the Admiral's Bridge, just below the pilot house. During World War II, this is where all the strategic battle decisions were made.
I was literally standing right here where I am now, and I just happened to look over my shoulder over here through that doorway over there, and I saw a gentleman with a khaki uniform on, with long sleeves and an overseas hat on, who looked over his left shoulder at me and went down the ladder. I excused myself, went down the ladder, and called after him. Didn't hear anything, and went down the ladder, didn't see anything, and went down the next ladder, looked on the flight deck, and called, didn't see anybody down there.
How does Alan explain the sighting?
Was it a ghost? I don't know. And was it an apparition? I don't know. But what I saw, I definitely saw, and he was very real.
Alan can't say for certain that the officer he saw was a ghost. Others on the USS Hornet make no bones about their beliefs.
Old ships, like old houses, old battlefields, they have memories that are there imprinted in that place forever. Whether you're seeing spirits, you're seeing memories, it's there.
Keith Ledoux runs an overnight program on the Hornet for children. Included in the evening entertainment is a ghost story hour. What the kids don't know is that the ghostly tales Keith tells really happened. According to Keith, the forward section of the ship is one of the most active areas for ghosts. It's called the forecastle, or forecastle for short. It's here that the ship's 30,000-pound anchors are dropped. Just a few years ago, he was in this area with a coworker. Keith is convinced that someone or something was watching him.
Turned around and looked over towards this catwalk area here, and leaning against one of the railings up there was a man in a sailor suit, work blues, leaning against the railings, giving me a strange look. So I turned around to take my mask off to get my buddy, and we turned back around, and the person was gone.
That wasn't the last time Keith says he saw a ghost in this part of the ship. A week later, that same sailor reportedly brought along his commanding officer.
They're basically going about their duty. As they did in life, they do in death.
Keith is also convinced that someone walked through wet paint without leaving footprints. It happened during the Navy's annual Fleet Week. Keith was staying overnight with other volunteers to get the boat in ship shape.
The first day we were here, we had painted that area where the bell is. That's the quarterdeck. Next to the bell is the captain's ladder. Now up to the top of the captain's ladder is a door. That was locked. There was a chain and a padlock on it. To get up that ladder, you have to walk through that area we painted. Now that night around midnight, we heard something crashing onto the deck.
Keith and his friends went to investigate. The sounds were coming from the quarterdeck, just a few steps away from the ship's gift shop and visitor gangway. What or who could it have been?
Former commanding officer, you got me, but something we heard and there was no footprints.
Bob Fowler is a volunteer who sleeps on board the Hornet 3 nights a week. He took us to the junior officer's berthing area to tell us his ghost story.
My first night that I spent aboard the ship was right in this rack right here. And about an hour into sleeping, I felt a tugging at my feet, and my feet were being pulled. And I wasn't sure whether I was asleep or not, or what it was. And there I got up, looked around, there was nobody here, no strings, no nothing.
Has Bob slept in that bunk since then?
I slept 2 bunks down here. I have a stateroom on the other side of the hallway that I sleep in 3 nights a week with the liveaboard program, but I won't sleep in that bunk.
For some odd reason, ghosts have frequently been reported in restrooms, and the USS Hornet is no exception. Inside this lady's room, some women say they've heard the disconcerting sound of male voices.
A lot of the women have reported hearing voices in here, male voices. They've experienced feeling a presence, mainly over by the mirrors and the sinks. And what's interesting is that the guys seem to be pretty respectful of the stalls themselves. They don't go in there, they don't try to peek over, but they're still pretty mischievous out here amongst the mirrors and the sinks. This is where people really feel like they're being watched.
It's been said that wherever tourists go on board the USS Hornet, whether it's in the ladies' room, the Admiral's bridge, or the officers' bunks, ghostly sailors are watching their every move. Coming up next, a tour guide who's convinced that a wealthy neighborhood in San Francisco has a ghost that can turn itself into a crow. There's no doubt about it. San Francisco is a tourist town. Visitors from around the world pack themselves into cable cars to catch the city's magnificent views. One of the city's most famous sights is Nob Hill, home to the Fairmont Hotel and dozens of Victorian mansions. This neighborhood is full of something else that most tourists don't know about, rumors that it's loaded with ghosts. Dressed in black leather from top to bottom, Jim Fassbinder takes visitors on San Francisco's Ghost Tour.
It doesn't matter whether you believe or just believe in spirits. And I don't go around trying to change people's minds. I just let them experience what's here and make up their own minds.
Fassbinder's first stop is the Queen Anne Hotel. Built in 1890 by a famous San Franciscan named James Fair as a finishing academy for girls. Today, it's a luxury bed and breakfast, but many claim the old school's headmistress, Miss Mary Lake, haunts the building. When Jim first decided to start his walking tour from the Queen Anne Hotel, he hadn't heard about any ghosts.
I was greeted by the concierge with, "Oh, you're here to investigate the haunting?"
Apparently, a guest staying on the 4th floor had just been spooked. Over the years, several guests have reported ghostly visitations.
People have seen a misty shape, and they describe this as being a woman. And it doesn't fill them with fear or dread. It fills them with comfort.
The strangest experience to date was reported by a businessman staying in room 410.
He came in one night very, very late. He was very tired and very cold, but he just walked over to the bed, fell down, and fell asleep. He woke up and found a blanket over him, and he knows for sure he didn't get up and get that blanket. Not only that, it was tucked in.
100 years ago, this suite was Mary Lake's office. Could be she's still in the business of comforting people. Isolated incident? not on your life.
A few weeks ago, almost by accident, I ran into the manager of this place who worked here over 10 years ago. And he told me that on his watch there were two very similar occurrences where someone staying in 410 would somehow fall asleep and then wake up with a blanket over them that they didn't get.
There's one more story that isn't part of Jim's ghost tour. That's because the hotel gave us the exclusive scoop. It almost sent one guest packing.
We had a regular guest who would stay here quite often, and he placed his shaving kit on the sink, and he heard things fall.
It looked as if someone was sweeping his things off the bathroom sink with their hand. Only there was no human hand in sight. Was this Mary's way of teaching him to keep his room free and clear of clutter? Or was she trying to have some fun with the clientele? We may never know, but one thing's for sure. A few are convinced that the ghost of Miss Mary Lake isn't ready to retire just yet. Just half a block from the Queen Anne Hotel is our next stop on the Nob Hill Ghost Tour. In the mid-1800s, a black woman named Mary Ellen Pleasant built her home and earned her fortune here. Today, her ghost is said to roam this grove of eucalyptus trees, all that remains of her former estate at 1660 Octavia Street. Some unsuspecting tourists say they felt the ghost's presence during Jim Fassbinder's tours.
People have seen things, they've felt things. Often when I'm telling my stories, people will feel footsteps behind them, and they'll turn around, and nothing will be there.
Mary Ellen Pleasant was no lightweight when it came to living. By the time she was 30, she'd been a slave in Georgia, a rich widow in Boston, and a voodoo priestess in New Orleans. Wealthy and wise, she arrived in San Francisco in 1852. She bought saloons, bordellos, and boarding houses. And in a gold rush town, where men outnumbered women 6-1, her boarding houses were always filled with rich, hungry, single men. It's said that Mary Ellen befriended young women who had lost their reputations. Her friendship had a price. These women became her spies, her ticket to wealth and power.
You know, she made a ton of money, and in this day and age, we'd call it insider trading. But back then, no one knew. They just knew she was a great cook.
Toward the end of her life, Mary Ellen was accused of murdering her business partner and alleged lover, Thomas Bell. She was acquitted, but the case ruined her. When she died, Mary Ellen Pleasant didn't have a penny to her name. Some say her restless ghost wanders among the eucalyptus trees, planted more than 100 years ago. According to Jim Fassbinder, she's taken a keen interest in his ghost tour.
One particularly night, a woman was helping me tell my stories by making jokes about Mary Ellen Pleasant. She was standing alongside of me and then fell over. No one was within 12 feet of her, but it felt to her like someone had come and pushed her.
Another witness told us about a bizarre altercation with what she believes was Pleasant's ghost. Her name is Joanna Karlinski, owner and pastry chef of the Meeting House restaurant. Joanna says she was attacked by Mary Ellen's spirit on her way to work. Coincidentally, she had just finished reading about Pleasant's life.
Well, I get to the end of the book and realize that in the last chapter, they're discussing what happened to Mary Ellen Pleasant. They said that the crows that lived in the trees were haunted by her spirit. And that's the old voodoo thing. They used to call her the voodoo queen of San Francisco. Well, I read that and laughed very hard and finished the book and said, that's very funny.
The very next day, Mary Ellen was waiting for her.
And out of nowhere, two crows started squawking, came flying down and tried to pick me up and take me away. And I laughed when I realized that I had just been saying, oh, this is so not true. These are such silly little ghost stories.
To this day, Joanna is convinced that Mary Ellen haunts the eucalyptus grove, less than half a block from her restaurant. There's one more stop on the San Francisco Ghost Tour that is not open to the public. Tourists must remain outside for this ghostly tale, but our cameras were invited inside for a private tour of the Atherton House. Built in 1891 as a single-family dwelling, the house has since been divided into apartments. Kim McLennan and her husband now own the building. They've lived there for 20 years. Before buying the house, the McLennans received a standard real estate disclosure. Typically, these forms tell you what's wrong with the house, so you can negotiate on price. This form was anything but typical.
The former owner presented my husband and I with an official disclosure that the house was haunted. That's how we found out.
That didn't stop the McLennans from buying the house. After she moved in with her family, Kim found out just what the word haunted meant.
And I was playing and heard this voice say, "Stop that." And I turned and looked around and tried to figure out where the voice was coming from. We played again, same voice, louder this time. "Stop that." And I looked at my son and I said, "Did you hear that? Did you hear anything?" And he said, "No." I shut the piano, walked out of the bar, and didn't come back for 4 months. I didn't walk back in that room.
Is it possible that a ghost from the mansion's history is haunting the Atherton house? The house was built by a rich widow from Chile. Her son George had a reputation for being lazy. His principal pursuit? Drinking whiskey. George married a novelist named Gertrude. She got a kick out of shocking San Franciscan socialites with her racy novels and tight-fitting dresses. They fought constantly. Their final battle took place on the dance floor of the Atherton mansion. Today, many believe that several spirits haunt this house. Chances are, one of them is Gertrude. Over the years, tenants have reported mysterious knocks, rushing winds, filmy apparitions. And even though Kim is dead sure her home is haunted, she's not alarmed.
I feel okay about it, and that I accept it as being a kind-hearted spirit, not something that feels dangerous.
Coming up, one of the richest women in American history believed that a bunch of ghosts designed her mansion.
If you like your world's best au naturel, the Travel Channel's got nature's top 10 attractions. From lights in the sky to vents in the ocean, it's must-see Mother Nature. Then, enter the eye of the storm. The Travel Channel's counting down the 10 best spots to see nature at its worst. All new World's Best Spectacles of Nature at top 10 places for extreme weather. Tomorrow starting at 9 on the Travel Channel.
When I was a kid, being a redhead made me feel different. Now it's one of the things that makes me me.
Revlon High Dimension Hair Color. So precise it only takes 10 minutes to deliver rich, beautiful color. Revlon High Dimension Hair Color. 10 minutes to beautiful.
I said move it on over. Move up. Move it on over. Move up, hold on, cause a new dawn moving in.
A ghost show about San Francisco wouldn't be complete if we didn't take a drive due south to a 160-room mansion that was reportedly designed by and for ghosts.
The Winchester Mystery House is an interesting place because it absolutely looks like it ought to be haunted. If nothing else, you're going to have a blast just walking through the house, no question, whether you encounter a ghost or not.
And although many visitors say they come to see the ghosts, they are surprised by the estate's architecture that sometimes verges on the bizarre. For some mysterious reason, the number 13 is everywhere. 13 palm trees, 13 window panes, 13 ceiling panels, 13 bathrooms. The mansion is one enormous maze, miles of twisting hallways, dozens of secret passageways, doors that open to blank walls, and sheer drops that could send an unsuspecting visitor down 3 stories to their death. For more than 100 years, strange stories have been circulating about eerie events at the Winchester House. The sound of disembodied footsteps, doors and windows that open and close by themselves, breezy curtains blowing, in rooms where the windows are shut tight. And to top it all off, it's been said that ghosts haunt the estate day and night.
I saw a figure of a man, just about half of him from his waist up. He was wearing overalls. And I was quite shocked to see this man because I was totally expecting Sarah Winchester.
If this ghost really does exist, why hasn't it moved on and out of the Winchester house? To answer that question, we need to travel back in time to the Winchester Arms Company in New Haven, Connecticut. In 1862, a young woman named Sarah Lockwood Pardee married multimillionaire William Winchester. He was an excellent catch, the son and sole heir to the Winchester rifle fortune, the gun that won the West. Two tragedies changed the course of Sarah's life. She lost her infant daughter to a rare disease, and her husband to tuberculosis. Desperate and lonely, Sarah searched out a medium who could talk to the dead. Expecting to hear from her deceased husband, Sarah soon found out that there were other spirits just dying to speak to her.
The spirit medium warned her that the spirits of the people killed by the Winchester rifles would potentially take out their revenge on her.
The spirits came from all walks of life: American Indians, Civil War soldiers, Western outlaws, and innocent bystanders. And they were all hell-bent on haunting Sarah to an early death. The ghosts ordered Sarah to build a great house for them. As long as the construction on this house never stopped, the spirits would let Sarah live, sparing her from the Winchester curse. Fearing for her life, Sarah bought an 8-room farmhouse just south of San Francisco in 1884. She hired a crew of carpenters to work around the clock, 24/7. It was an expensive undertaking, but Sarah had plenty of cash. She was earning at least $1,000 a day from Winchester rifle royalties alone. By the turn of the century, Sarah's modest farmhouse was a 7-story mansion with hundreds of rooms. No wonder people say it's easy to get lost at the Winchester Mystery House. But never fear, there are tour guides on hand to show visitors the way. The seance room in the center of the house is a favorite destination.
We do know that Sarah had seances in the house itself. We do know that these were a fairly common situation, and that Sarah was terrified of ghosts herself, which is why she tried to connect or try to talk to ghosts constantly.
To confuse unfriendly spirits that she believed were out to kill her, Sarah took different routes to this room each night on the stroke of 12. It was in this room that the ever-changing blueprints for the Winchester mansion were drawn up. Using a planchette board and a pencil, Sarah would let the spirits do the talking.
And the spirits would speak to her, and they would tell her things to do in the house, what kind of woods to put in what room, what kind of designs to have in the window. And she would sit there and she would draw them and design them.
It may have been Sarah's hand that drew the plans, but the ghosts allegedly pointed the way. Despite Sarah's obsessive determination to appease the ghosts, she died on September 5th, 1922. When her carpenters heard the news, they abruptly stopped all work. You can still see the half-driven nails throughout the mansion. Many believe that Sarah's spirit still roams the hallways of the Winchester house.
Sarah is typically seen in the hallways in the house, within the house herself. And it's pretty clearly, apparently, Sarah Winchester. She was a tiny woman. If you go through the house, you'll see this tiny little bed. And she even built stairs that were not quite as high as other stairs, so she could get around the house herself.
But according to some witnesses, there are others who have made the Winchester Mystery House their eternal wandering place. One witness saw a ghost by the name of Clyde.
I remember the very first time that I saw Clyde. I was asked to do a seance here at the Winchester Mystery House, and we were expecting Sarah Winchester to appear, but instead, this gentleman in overalls appeared before me, and he told me that he was the caretaker.
The seance took place in front of a camera crew, hoping to capture the ghost on tape.
Well, we waited, and we waited, and we waited, maybe 15 minutes, and finally the director said, "All right, cut, turn the cameras off, nothing is happening." As soon as they turned the cameras off, whoosh, all of a sudden this cold air comes streaming down the middle of the table, blows out the candles that are on the table, and everybody screams, of course. And I said, well, there he is.
Annette Martin isn't the only one who has seen ghosts at the Winchester House. John Stubert, a painter at the mansion for 20 years, has his own chilling tales to tell.
I was working up on a lot of patching a hole up in the wall, and I felt a tug on my collar, and I felt another one, and then I felt a stronger one, and it almost pulled me back off the ladder. And I looked behind me, and there was nobody there. There was nothing above me that I could hook my collar on, and so I jumped off the ladder.
In John's mind, there was only one thing he could do: get out of there, fast.
It gave me chills. Like I said, I came down and said that I was pale from fright.
Could ghosts be out to get you at the Winchester Mystery House? Or did Sarah Winchester just have a thing for spirits?
One would have to think that Sarah Winchester was obsessed with ghosts and spirits, because there's no other explanation for why this woman would build this house continuously and spent all that money, unless she somehow was seeing into the future and that there was a need in San Jose for a tourist attraction.
Coming up next, a restaurant with a sordid past and a ghostly present. Just south of San Francisco, on the edge of a picture-perfect cliff overlooking the Pacific Ocean, is a restaurant with 3 important ingredients: location, location, location. Stopping by the Moss Beach Distillery for lunch or dinner is a no-brainer for tourists and locals alike. It's known for its excellent food, great beer, magnificent views, and its very own ghost they call the Blue Lady.
There have been doors that have been locked that have opened by themselves, lamps have swung above the bar and above the hostess station, and people have seen the apparition, heard her voice calling their names. All very playful and all a lot of fun.
It's been said that the Blue Lady likes to play tricks on employees and diners.
I'll get goosebumps and chills walking around the restaurant at different parts of the day.
I have to admit, when I'm here alone at night, like when I come up the stairs after doing my checkout, I kind of get freaked out.
Is there something about the distillery's past that invites these hauntings? The original restaurant was called Frank's Roadhouse and was built in 1927 by a man named Frank Torres. During the Prohibition era, it was the speakeasy for anyone who felt the need for some illegal booze.
Frank's Place was kind of a highlight of the coast, and people would come as far away as supposedly from Hollywood and from well north of San Francisco.
It was also the principal drop-off point for whiskey runners and bootleggers. Legend has it that a piano player working at the restaurant was involved in an illicit affair with a beautiful woman who worked at a nearby hotel. Unfortunately for her, she was also the wife of a heavy-drinking bootlegger with a hot temper. Late one night, the husband showed up at the bar and saw the 2 lovers kissing. The piano player made a hasty retreat when he saw the bootlegger pull out a knife. The beautiful wife was not so lucky.
The next morning, the woman was dead. She was found on the beach stabbed. Shortly after that, the woman started being seen with the blue dress, with blood and what looked like knife slits on her dress.
Since that time, many claim they've seen and heard the Blue Lady throughout the restaurant. In fact, this ghost has become so popular that patrons come from far and wide to catch a glimpse of her. The restaurant's owner, John Barber, wanted her to show up at every meal.
John came to me and said, you're the ghost expert. Can you make her play with people a little bit more?
Thanks to secret devices hidden throughout the restaurant, the Blue Lady has gone high-tech. Tucked away in the back office is the central computer system that controls all these special ghost effects.
We thought about doing recreations, special effects that would recreate some of the things that people have reported. And so what we've done is we've got several other lamps, other than the one that had been reported moving, actually swinging several times each hour by themselves.
The ladies' room at the distillery is also rigged, but people have reported feeling a ghost there. Jan Mucklestone Fisher is a former marketing consultant for the restaurant.
Anytime I went down to the ladies' room, you just got a really creepy feeling.
it was just a sense, a presence of something watching you. And it was just always kind of cold, and you just kind of wanted to get out of there.
Today, that something is a computer-enhanced ghost.
In the ladies' room, it had been reported a number of years ago that women used to see the woman's face in the mirror. So what we have is a separate mirror where the face of a woman does appear in the mirror. And at the same time, people might feel a little cold chill because we have a blast of air coming down at the same thing.
Is the Blue Lady just special effects and clever marketing? Or is there really a ghost? Executive chef and general manager Gregory Feddersen says he has stories to prove the Moss Beach Distillery is haunted. During the dinner rush one night, an employee went to get wine bottles from the stockroom. The door usually opens easily. That night, it wouldn't budge.
I'd like to show you where it happened. Here's the door. It opens just like so. And he couldn't get into it. This is the only way in. There was no way for anybody to stack the wine behind this door and get out of the room. When we finally were able to get in, there was nobody in the room. And what could cause that? A ghost would cause that. It's the only thing that could happen.
There was no other explanation other than something, I believe, supernatural. There was no window, there was no crawl space, there's no opening. There was no explanation.
No one at the restaurant can explain the floating checkbook incident either, but they love to tell the story.
The former owner was down doing the books, and all of a sudden the checkbook starts to rise and starts floating across the office.
Was it a ghost? Or had the former owner spent too much time alone with the books?
She ran the business for 20 years, and, you know, there was no other reports of her being crazy, so I believe it.
Other scenes of ghostly activity in the restaurant rate a 10 on the fear scale, like the time Gregory says a ghost rushed through his body. It all started when he snapped photos of the main dining room.
When I took the picture, I got like a double flash on the camera. The second flash was softer. It wasn't mechanical, but it was instantaneously right after the first flash. And I looked down at the film that was developed, and the first shot that I took had these three white ghostly style images in the shot.
As if the ghost photo wasn't bizarre enough, just afterward, Gregory felt something pass through his body.
All of a sudden, it was just like a breeze going through me. I get this complete body chill, and it just went right through me 3 distinct times, and I immediately started thinking what I had to do to get out of the restaurant. It was interesting, to say the least.
According to waitress Virginia Ham, the Blue Lady is the real deal.
I think she's trying to show herself to me because I always say I don't believe in her. And so, you know, the lights are always, you know, turned off over my head and leave me in the dark. And that's happened like 4 or 5 times.
Virginia's own ghost story occurred in the middle of the day when she was setting up for lunch.
The tables were all set with the silverware and the napkins and the bread plates. And on one table, I noticed a spoon is vibrating really fast. And I thought, oh, well, maybe it's a machine, like, you know, from downstairs, vibrating the floor. But it would be like a few select things on each table. And as I noticed, there were like a few napkins, one here, one there, a spoon over there. It was just very random and weird. And we called a bunch of people around. It was funny. We were watching it for a while. But that was weird because there's no vibration in the floor.
Vibrating spoons, swinging lamps, floating checkbooks. It kind of makes you wonder, why would a ghost haunt the Moss Beach Distillery?
She has been there because she likes the activity, because she likes the people, because she has fond memories, and because she's apparently waiting for her boyfriend to show up and take her away. And my guess is she's just having too much of a good old time at the restaurant herself.
It's not easy to prove the existence of ghosts, but that doesn't stop the Moss Beach Distillery and other tourist spots around San Francisco from advertising their haunting tales. In fact, they welcome their ghosts and the business they bring in with open arms.
Hi, Tracy Gallagher for the Travel Channel. Hollywood has tons of attractions, but my favorite is really the pits. the La Brea Tar Pit. In these asphalt pools, scientists discover the remains of animals that have been extinct for thousands of years, like mammoths, saber-toothed cats, and a giant ground sloth or two. And if you want to uncover even more of nature's wonders, from mega volcanoes to rocks that mysteriously move, watch the premiere of World's Best, Spectacles of Nature, tomorrow night at 9 on the Travel Channel.